there's usually a guy, probably like me, right, who is a conservative Christian radiologic technologist standing behind the curtain, making wow, 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 wow sounds with his mouth. And then the ultrasound tech looks and says, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain."
Welcome back to Reason Together, the podcast for Christians who think about stuff. I'm your host, Daniel Fox, here with my great friend, Tom Balsamo. And how are you doing, Tom?
Hey, doing okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be an enjoyable episode. First, before we dive in, I want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/reason together. All of you pitching in your part of your life, that is your money, and to help what we do here. Sure appreciate that. Again, that's patreon.com/reason together. And especially those who are the elite patrons who make a significant contribution to every episode that we do here. And we thank you again for what you do. I'm going to ask our listener feedback today, reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can reach us there with any of your thoughts, your questions, your perspective, your feedback on things that we're talking about or things that you're just thinking about. reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. I want to start off today, though, by talking about like holidays. Holidays. I don't know if you know this, but there is like maybe not just a few shy of a bajillion holidays out there. It seems like, and I don't. Yeah. I guess I know why people do it, because then they sort of feel like they've staked a claim for their particular cause on a particular day, even though like them and their three friends pay attention to that. Yeah. But I've got this app that tells me like every day what the holidays are. So like, how about this one? September 21st was National School Backpack Awareness Day. What is that mean? Like you put, yeah.
I'm almost speechless. Almost.
Yeah, almost.
But I mean, is there some sort of epidemic of kids walking around with luggage on their backs that they're unaware of?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe. Like, hey, bub, did you realize you got a backpack on your back? Oh my goodness, I wasn't even aware of that. We need to. We need to start a National School Backpack Awareness Day so that more kids are aware of their backpack. Yeah, how about just loading it with twice as many books? They'll be aware of it like pretty fast, right? And then tell them to walk to school. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
This is a serious thing about backpack awareness.
No, I'm serious. Yeah. Now today, this is Elephant Appreciation Day. You know. I mean, because the rest of the year, you probably just take elephants for granted. But today, you need to appreciate elephants, for the value that they have in your life.
Yep. Just go outside and put your arm around the nearest elephant and say, thank you. Thank you right. for all that you do.
Come back here. Let me put my arm around you. All the way around. Okay, just around your trunk. Thank you. Oh, brother.
Thank you for all you. That's the sound you make when you get squished by the elephant.
Yeah. So I'm kind of. It's really interesting. Or, they're just one after the other. So my thought is, what should we have a holiday for? Maybe like we should petition to have a special day on the calendar. And I think, and this is obviously tongue in cheek, but maybe like a national let's decide not to kill our children day, or like a national common sense day. But that could really apply to everybody to say, hey, you know what? Today, maybe I'll use some common sense. I think that'd be good.
Who do you petition to get a holiday like Backpack Awareness Day? Who does this?
That is a good question. I don't know. September 23rd is Hug a Vegetarian Day. I mean, that might be a little awkward, especially if you're a vegetarian.
The good news is you could do it. You could do it even if your arms are really short.
That's right.
Most likely.
It'd be like the opposite of hugging an elephant, I suppose.
Yeah. Maybe it's one of those things that's just kind of done in the court of public opinion. If you could create an app for anywhere between $400 and $1,500 and fill it with holidays of your own choosing and stick it in the app store and market it somehow and get enough people to do it and get enough people to say it, after a while, in theory, you could have your own holiday with some sort of buzz marketing campaign, and maybe it'll stick. I mean, how do you think Valentine's Day got here? But just make it popular in the court of public opinion, and there it is.
So
anyway.
My listeners, what holiday would you recommend? What would you like to see on the calendar that we should celebrate? That being said, like a National Common Sense Day, I have to share with you, and I'm kind of triggered today, and I am in a good mood. It has been a good day.
Hold on, Daniel Fox is triggered.
Yeah,
watch out, everyone. It's going to be a rough ride on this episode.
Oh yeah, no joke.
Because you talk about the wrath and fury of Daniel Fox. It's hold on, folks.
Yeah, it's yourselves. Like feeling Jello hit your face. Oh, brother. So that's actually a sideways compliment there, because thank you.
Daniel Fox is a hard guy to get riled up. And that's it's more than can be said for the other host of this thing.
This thing. So, a lot of times you try to, sometimes maybe you don't, but people say some silly stuff and maybe you sort of just let it go. You kind of accommodate them. But this was absolutely mind blowing. Maybe one of the stupidest things I have ever heard in my life.
Okay. When I see that on our list. I just see the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and that's the one I wanted to do first.
And I've heard a number of stupid things, I'm sure, but this has to be one of the stupidest. And let's unpack this for a minute. Okay,
lay it on me.
Stacey Abrams. There's a video of Stacey Abrams on a panel. I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the context of several minutes behind and after, but the actual statement that came out of her mouth, she said almost, and I quote. And I almost quote, "There's no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. That is a manufactured sound designed to convince people to let men take women's control of women's body away from them." Wait, and nobody.
So it's a big conspiracy.
That's right. That is like the biggest conspiracy I have ever heard of.
Yep. I will have to talk to my ultrasound friends and make sure that they're aware that their machines could be hacked by Big Brother to make it sound like babies in the womb have heartbeats when they really don't. Right.
I mean, I've almost wondered if there's been a collective agreement of millions of doctors or rad techs who are like holding this device and they're like going, and then they stop somehow in the middle of that sound and they go, "Oh, hey, you notice that's your baby's heartbeat. You should probably let a man have control of your body." And I'm just like, what in the world? It's a manufactured sound designed to convince people to let men take control of women's bodies away from them. Like,
well, what it is the ultrasound tech can't do that because they're there with the patient. So the patient would see them doing that. So really you notice a curtain in the corner of your room, when you're having your ultrasound done for your baby, there's usually a guy, probably like me, right, who is a conservative Christian radiologic technologist standing behind the curtain making wow, 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 wow sounds with his mouth. And then the ultrasound tech looks and says, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." That's what it is. You heard it here first, folks, on Reason Together, the nationwide conspiracy
of the
ultrasound machine. It is caused by, I admit it publicly, it is me. I am behind the curtain. I am making the heartbeat sound.
And then, of course, the logical step, that sound that you hear means that a man should take control of your body away from you. What?
Right.
Like you shouldn't move your own arms anymore. You should let a man move your arms. I mean, what a control of my body. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't breathe without a man. Please help us. Obviously that's not what she's saying, but it's so absurd on its face that it's a
this is the same
sound. I can't believe it.
This is the same woman who still believes she is the rightful governor of Georgia.
Right.
After losing a fair election. So just consider the source, I guess.
I just wondered, like, let's see, I'm looking at the picture. 1, 2, 3. There's 6 other people on the panel. Did any of them use my son's terminology? I like this. Hold up. Did any of them go, hold up, wait, what? No, come on, Stacy.
Well,
you're
kidding,
when
it comes to when it comes to sides of the right,
National Common Sense Awareness Day. There you go.
Yeah, common sense awareness. Can you be aware of common sense if you have no common sense? I don't know. But when it comes to conspiracy theories on both sides of the political aisle, there are obviously people with conspiracy theories on the right, always have been, and there always have been on the left. When it comes to extremes, right? But like. People seem to think that there is no such thing as a conspiracy theorist on the left, and that's just as crazy as could be.
Well, you heard
and this
that
is just one example.
Busted. Yep, exactly. Yeah. No joke. That's amazing. So there you go. Had to start the episode with national holidays. I get. Well, I don't know if they're national holidays. Well, maybe some of them are. I don't know that Hug an Elephant Day or Elephant Appreciation Day is really a national holiday, but. Anyway, if you have any insight as to how we could sort of petition for a Common Sense Awareness Day, and then alert Stacey Abrams to that might be great.
I just in my mind had this image. Those stickers that people have been putting around on gas pumps of Joe Biden pointing.
Yeah,
and it's pointing at the price tag, and it says, "I did that."
Yeah. Okay.
In my mind, I just envisioned a sticker like that of myself. With like a little word bubble coming out going, wow, 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 on ultrasound machines all around the country.
Yep. Be like, I did that.
I did that. Wow, 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 wow. That's it.
Yeah. But how do you spell that in the word bubble? Well, just like it sounds.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we want to start off today, Tom?
Oh, I don't know. That one, I could just keep going on that one.
Yeah, no joke.
Well, I like this one you wrote down here. We've got a couple here from listeners, but then you wrote down one here. Are we responsible to make the world a better place?
Yeah. What do you think?
No. Next question.
All right.
No. As with many things, the answer to that is it depends. And when I first read that title, there was one passage of scripture that came immediately to mind.
Oh, good.
And it was Romans 12 and verse 8. It says something there like as much as is possible to live peaceably with all men, right? Something like that. I'm paraphrasing there. Mm-hmm. But I mean, could you not define that as an attempt to make the world a better place while you're in it? Yeah, I suppose so. But I don't think that's what everyone means by it. I think people who often have the idea that we're supposed to make the world a better place are often coming from a worldview that's limited to this world only. And they're often looking at it from a very environmentalist perspective, a very social causes perspective and humanitarian perspective, rather than from an evangelistic perspective and an eternal perspective.
Yeah, because you think about, that perspective is, a naturalist perspective says, what does that mean what does that look like to leave the world a better place? I guess people are happier, resources are conserved and thriving, and everyone is generally at peace and doing, and happy, basically. Yeah. And
that's not to say that I don't want those things. Well, certainly sure. I do.
But what if I live my life and people aren't happier because of what I did, because I confronted them with the gospel, because I told them truth, and I ended up martyred in the process, and the only thing that made them happy was my martyrdom. did I leave the world a better place? Well, I mean, because if you understand the biblical paradigm that while we are lights and while we are supposed to be salt to the earth, and that some will be saved, the path is narrow that leads to eternal life. The path is broad
Sure.
that leads to destruction. And we understand, even, if you will, eschatologically, and what I mean by that is in the terms of end time events, things are going to go down before they go up. I mean, the church is going to be raptured up. There's going to be entered in a tribulation. There's going to be destruction and misery like nobody's ever known before God comes back, whoops up on his enemies, and then sets up the millennium and eventually, eternity. I mean, the new heaven, new earth.
Right.
But so I should expect in my lifetime to some degree to see the worldly culture and secular world spiraling downward, right? I mean,
well, sure. That's what we're told about it.
Right. So to leave that a better place, well, what do you mean by that? You mean like I had kids and I led them to the Lord and into a sanctified lifestyle to now be lights to the world? Well, I guess I left it better in that way. Or that's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
But that I made them happier, and that everybody's just like, oh, that in everyone else's opinion, I would have lived a profitable life by their standards. No, not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, it's the difference between what you've maybe heard termed before as a big God, little man theology versus a big man, little God theology. If I look at the world from the perspective of, I need to make the world a better place, that's very man-centered. Whereas if my perspective is, I'm here to live according to God's purposes, that's very God-centered. And when you do that, that doesn't always look like it's making the world better from a lot of people's perspective. And we also have to consider what we're doing with verses like 2 Timothy, what is it, 3? 2 Timothy 3?
I've just been studying that recently, personally, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. So we're told outright that the world is going to get worse and worse. So to have the worldview that we're supposed to make the world a better place, I don't know, that seems somewhat conflicting. Again, that doesn't mean you just kind of let everything go downhill that you can. That's not the right response. But I think everyone is going to differ on how they think making the world a better place is done. You know what I mean? Not everyone agrees on how that is done.
Right. Looking up that passage on, deceived and evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. That's 2 Timothy 3:13. And even in the beginning of that chapter, he's talking about, that, let's see, I'm
persecutions.
Chapter 3 here. This is no. 2 Timothy is what I'm looking for here. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1, he says, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. And then he just describes what will be reality. Men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemer, and on it goes. I mean, several descriptions of what men will be like. That will be the reality in a time, in Paul's reference, in a time to come, so yeah, I mean, I would just kind of say it's a sort of a misdirected statement. What is my responsibility? My responsibility is to obey the Lord implicitly, as Jesus said, to do the work of the Father. And that means to glorify Him.
To not be surprised. I think that's maybe our initial duty here.
What's that mean?
To not be surprised by an increasingly terrible world.
I see.
Like that shouldn't surprise me. And yet, how often are we shocked by the horrible things that we hear on a day-to-day basis? It really shouldn't surprise us. We should be prepared for this, as the scriptures have told us that things will wax worse and worse. And I mean, the second responsibility maybe in that would be to live according to God's holy purposes. And like I mentioned earlier, and maybe a third responsibility is that just to be ready for when Jesus comes, live every day like he's coming today. Those might be 3 fair responses to, the world becoming more and more terrible.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Let me get back to my list of questions here. You must have written this question here. Do I need to earn my child's respect? Is that your question?
Yeah, that one's an old one that I
Okay.
put on there a while back, and
Yeah.
there's no shortage of parenting philosophies out there, and what's the saying about opinions and dirty diapers? I forget what it was or how it goes, but something like everyone has had them and they all stink or something.
And
I
they
forget.
change regularly.
Yeah, that's it. Something like that. I'm probably botching the whole phrase, but that's the idea. And even amongst Christians, there's different parenting philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally I run across this parenting philosophy online amongst Christian circles. The idea that I have to earn my child's respect. What do you think about that? In order to raise a child for the Lord, do you need to earn their respect?
I would alter that a little bit. I would say, number one, you need to teach them what respect is and who and how they ought to respect. And then, of course, in obeying the command to, I'm thinking of fathers here, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, you will earn their respect. Especially if you're not provoking them to wrath. It's going to be a natural outflow, I think, by and large, of your obeying the Lord and of teaching them what respect is. It's not that they just inherently. Now, I do think in a functional family where the parents actually care, there is just sort of an intrinsic devotion from the child. I
agree with this.
And I say functional. I that even breaks out of the functional family. My mom, prior to the time I was born, at one point had like 10 foster boys. And I'm sure they're from, broken homes and these bad backgrounds, obviously from broken homes. That's the reason they're in foster care. But boy, I mean, some of them, if not all of them, would stand up for their mom. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, they love their mother. And so there's that intrinsic love. And I think if a dad treats his kids right, they like dad, Dad is a secure figure. The girls feel the security of their dad. But anyway, if you teach them, but I have, said, to my own kids, something like, hey, who is this? This is your mother. This is not your sister. This is not your classmate. This is your mother. Right. This is, she is up here. You respect her. You talk to her differently. You respond to her this way. I'm teaching them how to respect, and that respect is deserved by this person in God's design. And so you need to direct that sin nature to a proper understanding of respect. And then as you live God's design, it'll be there, I think.
I guess here's my concern with the saying. And I don't disagree with anything you said. I think there will be a natural respect in a functional home in which the children have a respect for their parents. And that will develop more and more over time. It's not like they come out of the womb instantly respecting parents. They have to be taught that.
Right.
But I think many times people make the mistake, especially with very young children, this concept of I have to earn my child's respect. Well, how are you going to do that when they're very young? And that's my concern, is that parents are going to do things to try and earn the child's respect, but the child has no idea what they mean by respect. They have no idea what respect is. Right. And to a child, they're going to interpret that as my parent is doing things that I want them to do. Right. I want more of this. Right.
Right. And I'm earning my child's approval and not their respect.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And see, I don't think you earn your child's respect by earning their approval in every case.
Right.
And my concern with the whole thing is that it essentially creates a child-centric home in which this whole culture of, I have to teach, I have to earn my child's respect. Well, no, they need to learn to respect the office of parent.
Yes.
Whether a parent is always good at earning their child's respect or not, they need to respect the office of parent. Because one of the things you're going to find out as a parent is that you're not perfect. And the moment the child has learned throughout life that their parents struggled and tried to earn their respect, what happens when the parent is suddenly not perfect in the eyes of the child? real or perceived, right?
Mm.
Even if the child starts to perceive all the imperfections of their parent, well, they're going to lose respect for their parent. They need to respect the office of parent, especially. Now, that doesn't mean that parents are above reproach in
No,
every
right.
case. Obviously not. You don't want to teach that to the child either. But I think there's this whole concept of parenting out there that just elevates the child so much that
Mm-hmm.
it essentially cripples and hamstrings the parent from ever actually having to train and discipline and repeat and train and discipline and repeat, because I might not earn the child's respect. I think that's folly.
I agree. I agree because I mean, there's more to say there, but you have to understand as a parent that you have a God-given authority. Somebody in the
Yeah.
home has to be in control. Now,
Yeah.
of course, there's the balance that they're not a doormat and you're not allowed to do anything and talk to them anyway. I mean, and be right with God.
Right.
I
Right.
understand that, of course. But I like the analogy of, if you will, like a solar system that, when the child's born, he's born into the family orbit. Everything doesn't orbit around him, it orbits around more so the parents, but, and ideally we'd say, the center would be God, but we're all orbiting, or they're orbiting, they're a part of the orbit. They're in orbit. They're with everybody else. They have a valuable and a real place, but they're not the center. We don't all revolve around them. They have
Right.
to fit into what is our family doing?
Yeah.
Where are we going? What is our purpose? And our purpose isn't for you to decide what we're doing. You've got to fall in line and understand your role
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And I guess, Mike, I'm just concerned that with such a parenting philosophy, it's kind of creating, it's having a spiritual sounding way of just saying, I'm a parent who doesn't occasionally break some eggs. Instead, I walk on eggshells for my kids. And I just think that's folly.
And let me just throw out one thought too. Sometimes we can look loving, and I'm not accusing everybody in a certain parenting philosophy of this per se, but sometimes we can we can misidentify something. I cuddle and hold and love my child all the time because I love my child. Well, really, it's a self-love because that's what makes you feel good. You feel
Right.
fulfilled, and I mean,
Very good point.
in a jokey way, sometimes my kids will might get hurt or something, and the little girl bonks her head or something like, oh, come here, give me a hug. It'll make me feel better anyway. I don't know if it'll help your
Right.
head, but I'll feel better about it because I
Right.
gave you a hug. But what was that really loving you? And so that coddling mentality is sometimes a self-love by the parent.
There was a number of years ago, and I don't know if this is still a thing in some places. There was this wacky trend of young girls in between 15 and 25 years of age getting these designer handbags in which you could put a tiny puppy. And they would get these little dogs that they would put in these handbags, and they would carry them around with them. I remember this is back all the way back when I was still living in Pennsylvania, the hospital I was working at. I remember some of the employees there talking about that. And I said, is that really a thing? And they said, oh yeah. Yeah. And they were telling me about it. But it's almost like, and me, I'm not a huge pet guy, but I can still see the silliness sometimes of using a living creature as a fashion accessory. And in many ways, they gush over the cuteness of this little thing. Really, it's for their own gratification in many ways.
Yeah.
But what you said makes a lot of sense, because some people do treat parenting that way. Mm-hmm. They treat their child like it's a fashion accessory. Mm-hmm. And even in some Christian circles, this whole style of parenting can become a trendy fashion accessory, like a designer handbag with a puppy in it. Now, granted, they're probably not literally doing that with their child, carrying their child around in a handbag, but there's almost the same mentality that I've got to have the trendy parenting style and then all of this. And it's like, I don't know, just gag me.
I pray for Tom's
Just raise,
kids, you know.
just raise the kid in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, you know.
Right.
And I realize, you know, I don't have daughters. I fully accept the fact that if I had a daughter, I would parent the child differently than I parent my sons. I acknowledge that. Okay, I raise boys. That's exactly what we're doing here. But that doesn't mean I think every parenting style and philosophy is valid and good. But anyway,
Right.
I digress.
True. Okay.
Now who's triggered?
Well, you're always triggered, but I mean, for me, it was no. I'm just kidding. Not really.
Hey, that was a shot across the bow. That was unprovoked. That triggered me again.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple listener feedback here. I would like to go to this one. Omar writes in and says, hey, in episode 160, you were talking about church governance and the need to give people room to grow. This is very true, and I thought it would be a good time to ask your thoughts, something I've been thinking about for a while. I have always thought it odd that when a person gets saved and wants to join a church, we first have them make a, quote, statement of positive affirmation, end quote, saying they agree with our entire doctrinal statement, even as a brand new convert. Many new converts probably don't understand half of the doctrinal statement. It seems strange that we don't give them any room to grow and to be convinced of what we believe in the finer points of theology. Only recently, I have discovered that many churches have two statements of faith, one for church leadership, preachers, teachers, deacons, etc., and one for general membership. The membership statement of faith is simplified to remove the deepest levels of specificity found in the larger statement of faith. This seems like a good way to allow fellow believers to be part of our church while still giving them space to grow. What are your thoughts? And then he says, addendum, some examples of points that might not be necessary for a new member's statement of faith include sanctification as a progressive process, church's relationship to Israel, when the church began, local church versus universal church, tithe, dispensationalism, divorce, remarriage, use of tobacco and alcohol, various personal standards, specific timing of end time events, and detailed eschatological interpretations. So back to his question, what are your thoughts about two different doctrinal statements?
I don't know. It seems kind of weird to me at first. Though I can't say I'm totally against the idea. It seems kind of weird to me. I mean, I would rather just take someone who's new and just disciple them through each thing slowly. Before membership is even a consideration. Do you know what I mean?
I see.
And it would also depend on whether they have any viewpoints on these subjects beforehand. Like, how often does someone truly come in as a blank slate? It's kind of rare, you know. If someone did come in as a blank slate, I could see maybe having a very simplistic doctrinal statement to start them off with, and not hiding the ball and saying this is our kind of beginner's doctrinal statement. We have a more complex one that will come in time. We're not trying to hide the ball from them, but I don't know too many people that come in as a blank slate. Most people already have some sort of preconceived notion about a lot of these things that have been listed. Maybe not all of them, but I would much rather just take someone through the doctrinal statement just slowly. But I will admit that is overwhelming to a lot of people. There are even seasoned veterans of church who, when they look at our doctrinal statement, they go, whoa. It's like, I can't ever know all of this. And usually my response to them, because it's required that we go through it with them if they're going to join. Usually my response to them is something like, well, none of us expect you to have all of this information mastered. Right. But the reason why we go through it is so that we can verify and acknowledge that your heart leans toward the Word of God on these subjects. because we provide scriptural support for each subject. And if we go through this thing together and we find that someone leans away from the scripture and says, I don't like what that says, I disagree with that, well, then we're going to have some issues with that church member. So, I'd much rather just go through it and kind of see where their heart is at.
I would say, like what you're saying, with them, looking at it and seeing it's overwhelming. Think about somebody in the New Testament day, on the day of Pentecost. They hear the preaching, they're convicted. Of course, they're already thoroughbred Jewish people, right? For the most part, unless they're proselytes. But yeah, Jewish people. So they're really grounded in an Old Testament theology and things like that. But they hear the preaching, they're converted, they're baptized, and that day there's added to the church, 3,000 souls. Now, I think there's an argument there for it's not just they were added to the universal church, they became part of the broader body of Christ, but that they became a part of the church as an organization, that, if you will, they were on the rolls. Did they understand, say a Jewish 12-year-old boy hears it. Is he thoroughly versed in all the apostles' doctrine? No, but he knows enough to say, that's what I want to be a part of. And I want to follow these men, and I want to learn from them, and I want to know God. This is the way of truth. So they sign on to that. Of course, they're going to grow into it, and their understanding is going to be expanded. But here's what I want to say is that your doctrinal positions define who you are. And so to say, to define myself less, to say, here, do you want to join me? And I'll sort of blur the edges a little bit, and I'll make myself less defined so that you can feel comfortable being with me. And then eventually, hopefully you'll agree with me. Well, no, your doctrinal position defines who you are, and people, they won't grasp the totality of the doctrine, but I feel like they can still say, but if that's what your doctrinal stance is, that's fine with me. I'm with you because I want to be a part of this body. Now, in time, will we learn that? Sure, we all have growth, but this is who we are. And so to lessen the doctrine is really to, in some ways, minimize our identity. And then my question is, if somebody becomes like a member on the membership level, but not the leadership level, and then they are growing, they're listening to what you say, and they disagree with you. They refuse to be convinced by the scriptural proof, whether it's about the church's relationship to Israel or divorce and remarriage or, the things like that, local church versus universal church. They say, well, I disagree. We don't really agree on that doctrine. But now what do you do? Do you say, well, now I've given you time to grow. You don't agree, so I'm going to have to church you, or you're going to have to resign your membership. When right up front, and I guess it's similar, basically, if they sign on up front and you teach them, but at least they knew, okay, this is our doctrinal statement coming forward. Yeah. Instead of like, well, now you knew this on a membership level, this is our leadership level, and you have to eventually agree on the leadership level in order to stay. Well, when do they grow into the leadership level of the thing? Do they sign? Are they getting 10 years?
I feel like we're getting off in the weeds here a little bit. To back up, kind of where you started with this, whether someone joins and says, I'm committing my loyalty to this institution, even though I don't understand everything they're going to teach me yet. Mm-hmm. That to me is fundamentally no different than the person who says, okay, I'm looking at the beginner's version of a doctrinal statement, and they tell me there's a more advanced version of this later. There's really no difference between the two people. They're doing the same thing and they know the same amount. It's just done a different way. And I don't think that you're lessening the identity of the church by giving them a beginner's doctrinal statement, as long as you are making them aware there's more to this. Are you willing to stick around and learn this? It would be different if you said, here's a beginner's doctrinal statement, but never showed them the other one and told them that this is all you need to know. That would be different. That to me is guile. That's hiding the ball from them. But I also want to acknowledge a difference between first century and today.
Yes.
I think we often look at ancient people and we think that they weren't as smart as we are. And I don't think that's true.
No.
Now, I will acknowledge
No.
that in Acts chapter 2, they did not yet have the full body of doctrine that we have since Paul's writings and then ultimately finishing with the Apostle John.
True. Right.
They didn't have all of that. So what they were doing by becoming part of that body is they were saying, I am, in a sense, committing my loyalty to this institution, though I don't know everything they're going to teach me yet. Whereas today, when it comes to people joining a church, it's a totally different approach that people have. People don't look at church, I think, the same way that first century Christians did. First century Christians were joining an institution that is very likely going to be persecuted, and they all knew it because Christ himself was crucified, the head of that body. And they're joining something that they know could cost them a lot. There was a degree of loyalty implicit even in joining. Whereas today, people look at church in the same way that they scroll through similar products on Amazon. And your job in showing them your doctrinal statement, I'm going to say the unvarnished truth. You're basically selling them on your church. Because you have to convince them with this doctrine that what you're saying is biblical and right, and they either buy it or they don't. And people look at your doctrinal statement, they go, I don't know. I don't like that. That seems too strict to me. That seems too narrow to me. And then they just go look somewhere else. It is really the, well, to use your word, the defining factor of a church is what it believes. So I'm not opposed to someone joining it with limited knowledge, as long as I can see with the doctrine that they're being taught whether their heart is bent toward the scriptures or not. Because you can tell when someone joins a church and they've given their heart to Christ and they've given their loyalty to his institution, you can tell this person is teachable. This person is going to learn. This person is a thinking individual, but they're also a humble individual. And you have to have both of those things. And I think the average church shopper, to use the term, who often just ends up a church hopper, the average church shopper today, they often don't seem to have a teachable spirit. They have preconceived ideas that they bring to the church, and they want the church to simply bend toward them, otherwise they won't stay. And they often don't have the humility or the loyalty to the institution that God made. It's treated like a product.
So you feel like if you had someone like that you could tell was just sort of, wanted to bend you to their will, and you gave them the primary doctrinal statement, the primitive doctrinal statement, and they agreed that far, so they became members. Do you really want that to happen, or would you rather just tell them up front, this is who we are in detail, and if you don't like it, then shop elsewhere? Which would be less problematic.
That's what I said from the beginning, was I would rather go through it with them in its entirety, slowly, and see where their heart is at. Because one of the things that happens in ministry frequently is pastors invest in people. They put time and energy into people. They build a relationship with people, and then their heart gets ripped out when this person has all of this investment now. And then you get to, doctrinal section blank, subsection A, B, or C, whatever. And they go, oh, I don't think I agree with that. We're going to the place up the road, or what have you. And then you've made all this investment seemingly for nothing. It seems in some ways maybe colder and more objective to just go through it all with them at first. And you're probably going to stay small as a church. But at least when you do have people that stick around, they're sticking around for the right reasons, and there's maybe less heartache in it, potentially. So
I'm looking at the list, and I know some things we would say. I mean, I don't. Maybe some doctrinal statements do cover it. Various personal standards. Okay. Or when the church began, that may not seem as serious. But, if I look at each of these things and I say, who would that, if I left that out as a deeper doctrinal definition, so that, they don't understand that and they could come in, or I say they couldn't understand it, or I may not know they believe something different, but they would agree with the person of the Holy Spirit, but I leave out sanctification as a progressive process. What does that mean? That they can believe in the second blessing or the church's relationship to Israel? Could I be letting in a covenant theologian? Local church versus universal church? Could I be letting in an LCO guy? I mean, it's like what would I be permitting into my body, and then later saying, "Whoa, that's wrong."
I think the key distinction Omar makes in his question is that he talks about when a person gets saved and wants to join a church.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of our conversation has bled over into maybe those who are already saved and they're reviewing your doctrinal statement. I get that. But, when it comes to someone getting born again at your church, are they always a blank slate? No, of course not. They're still going to come in with some preconceived notions about these ideas. Is it fair in that circumstance, if they want to join, to simply let them, even if they don't have, the whole doctrinal statement, under their belt at this point? I think in some cases that's fair. I think in some cases it is. If you have discerned that this person has given their heart to Christ and they have a loyalty to his institution in which they desire to join it, and they love the brethren, I think it's fair to let them join, but don't keep them ignorant. Don't let them sit in the dark.
Well, yeah, fair to let them join, but how? What are you saying? Fair to let them join? But that's sort of aside from the doctrinal statement. How does that pull in the doctrinal statement question?
Well,
it's fair to let them
that's his
join.
question. Omar's question is about, I've always thought it odd when a person gets saved and wants to join a church, we first have them make a statement of positive affirmation saying they agree with our entire doctrinal statement. Mm-hmm. I'm saying if someone does get saved and they get baptized and they want to join the church, I think a rudimentary understanding of the doctrinal statement is fine. They're not going to be, a theologian the first week.
Well, and I agree with what you said, that we permit them to have a rudimentary understanding of it, but to give them a rudimentary doctrinal statement, to me, is a different thing. So when he says it seems strange that we don't give them any room to grow, that's really, I wouldn't say that's true. Of course, we give them room to grow, but we say, but this is who we are, as a body. So this is what you're a part of, and up front, you may not understand all this stuff, and certainly you're going to grow, and we want you to grow. But it's different to say you don't understand all this stuff versus let's give you a dumbed down doctrinal statement, that sort of mildly defines who we are. I think it's kind of problematic myself. It actually creates more issues, in some ways, as far as like, how do you legislate all that? Well, like, okay, you're a new believer, but now you've been saved. Well, how many years? 7 years? Okay, well then, no, we got to give you the souped up doctrinal statement because you've had long enough okay, then who gets what, and at what point do they get the next one? And
well, looking at the question again, he says it seems strange that we don't give them any room to grow and be convinced of what we believe in the finer points of theology. And he goes on to say about these churches that have one doctrinal statement for the church leadership and another for general membership. In a sense, you would be forced to have to acknowledge that many of your points of doctrine in your leadership statement are flexible, because you're going to have to conclude that in order to be a member of this body, we have to allow you to come to different conclusions than us on these matters.
Well, that's what I wondered. Like, what's the flexibility? And they're like you don't have to believe as much as the leadership does. Well, okay, then what constitutes an actual disagreement with the doctrinal statement? What if they disagree with is a disagreement with the leadership statement different than a disagreement with the membership statement, or how does that,
Well, I think what it comes down to is if you're showing them the fullest of your doctrinal statement, the fullness of it, you're not necessarily telling them what to believe. You're showing them why you believe it.
Yeah, you're saying this is who we are.
Yeah, and I think what Omar is maybe kind of seeing here is that some churches have this full doctrinal statement, and they're telling you, here's what you have to believe. Whereas I think it should be incumbent upon the leadership to say, here's what we believe, here's why. You're welcome to believe this and stay, if you wish. I think that's kind of the maybe the that's the meat in the sandwich right there, is the part where we say this is why we believe what we believe. And a lot of churches lack that. They simply say, here's the doctrinal statement, that's that. Whereas they don't actually seek to really gain the heart of the person. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to require sitting down with them and saying, here's what we believe, and this is why. And let me show you the scriptures on this. In fact, don't even just look at the verses. Let's go to each of them and let me explain to you why each of these verses is relevant to this topic. And by the time you're done, 2-3 hours with somebody, you've only finished one point in the doctrinal statement. Well, so be it. Their heart is at least convinced at this point, if they've got a heart that leans toward the scriptures. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. We have a statement of approval, basically, that a new member would have to sign, of agreement, essentially. And it is kind of that positive affirmation of the doctrinal statement. But if someone says, "Whoa, I don't know. I don't think I can agree to that." Well, you're free to attend and listen and understand. You can't be involved and connect with us in the same way, but we don't really, in some ways, really want you to be really invested until we know you're one of us. And so if we,
well, if we take his addendum here in the question, kind of what conclusion this forces is essentially that all of these doctrines that he lists in the addendum would have to be viewed as being not
the non-essential.
Yeah, as a non-essential, effectively. And I don't like that term, but I know what people mean by it. Because you would end up with a church where you might have some of the congregation believes in the second blessing and some don't. Some of the congregation believes the church began on this day, and some believe it began on this day, or what have you. Some are local church, some are universal church, and some are both, and some don't believe in tithing, and so on. You would really end up with quite a mixed bag. Which, yes, it does give people room to grow, but where is all of the leadership in this? You know what I mean? Where is the leadership sitting down with people and actually discipling them? That's my question. Because you could eliminate a lot of the mixed bag stuff if you have someone who has the heart of a teacher who's going to be really discipling people and helping them along.
I would just say one other comment before we wrap this up is a legal comment. We followed the instruction of the CLA, the Christian Law Association, years ago in adding things to our doctrinal statement, maybe even to our bylaws, but partly to protect ourselves legally because of, I guess, issues that had happened, particularly with, say, the gay, under the gay agenda, or it seemed like there was another one. But where someone basically might infiltrate the church, and because of a lack of specificity in the doctrinal statement, they'll give tithes and they'll become invested. They'll work themselves into a place of authority, and then they'll announce, "Oh, I'm a homosexual." "Well, you can't be a homosexual. We kick you out of the church." "Oh, well, then I want my tithe back." And then they sue the church or something like that. So if they know up front who you are, and instead of just saying, "We believe that we ought to live a pure life before God," well, that's not very specific, but if we say, we, and I can't remember the exact wording of our doctrinal statement, we view as a sin all these forms of sexual perversion, transvestism and, pedophilia and blah, 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 blah. Those are outlined as those are wrong. And if you ever stand up and say, "Oh, well, I am one of those," then we say, "Well, you've just disqualified yourself from membership. You're no longer a member because you knew that coming in. We had a small front door, and you knew what that was." But if you have a large front door that's just kind of like, as long as you generally agree with this, come be a part of us. And then later, it seems like you're dealing with a lot more ruckus internally because of disagreement. Where if you have a small front door, they knew up front what you believe. They may not have understood it all, but they knew up front. And if they did understand it and wanted to infiltrate, that's not a good place to do it.
Yeah. Well, it would certainly be easier for us if we had some sort of New Testament predicate to tell us exactly how big our doctrinal statement should be required for membership. I can't think of any. Can you, as far as, what do we put in it? What do we not? And yeah.
I'm just thinking of, it was Acts 2:42. And let me find the text of that. That says, and they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread and prayers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm not saying that there isn't a New Testament predicate for what we should believe. There, of course, is. But as far as the actual printing out of a doctrinal statement for public consumption and for membership requirements, I don't know of any details on that.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, that would make it easy.
So anyway. Well, thank you, Omar, for the question, and we've got a bit of other feedback we haven't gotten to yet, and we'll have to cover it in another episode. But anyway, thanks all for listening, and give us your feedback. A Reason Together podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah, thank you for being with us on this episode. We are encouraging balance, developing perspective, and connecting faith to practice. This is Reason Together.